Hi gang, the Joy of Football podcast this week goes all over Europe. We start with over land and sea, in which Martin goes to Athens for a European Cup final and I go to Barcelona for a semi-final.
And we look back the way they were, the way we were, Tottenham Hotspur.
Relegation year, that is. On to letter from the Gantry. Martin's at Birmingham City.
The voice of passion, and Neil's got plenty to say, I promise you.
Expensive tickets, drives me out the wall. Three of the best, a young player, old player, and Martin's fallen in love with the Plymouth Argyle manager.
And talking of Plymouth, they feature in our comparisons with other clubs that have won a cup tie against current Premier League leaders, as Plymouth have just done.
And finally, stoppage time, in which we introduce you to a charity game coming up that you really ought to hear about. You also ought to look at our Patreon to get more involved. You ought to read our substack.com site, in which you can follow Martin's letters and my thoughts about everything. That's called The Joy of Football as well. And just subscribe to us, like us, or don't like us and turn off. The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for a shot in! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello. The Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, is going around Europe, up to the Midlands, to North London, and goodness me, down into the dungeons where teams from nowhere beat the Premier League leaders in the FA Cup. Love it.
Are you saying we're global?
Well, we're yeah, to a certain extent.
It would be nice to think that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we're pretty European this week, actually, not so much global. We're going to start with Over Land and Sea, a segment that we haven't done often enough, which is basically just tells of our football lives abroad. Martin.
Well, this is the story of a trip, really. 2 days in May 1994, back-to-back days. On the Tuesday night, England versus Greece at Wembley. And on Wednesday, the Champions League final, which just happened to be played in Greece between Milan and Barcelona. And I was working for Sky. I was down to do the England game, and I was asked if I could do the Champions League final as well. The logistics were not helpful, but I found a route. So I did the game, which was a 5-0 win for England at Wembley. Darren Anderton scored his first England goal. Peter Beardsley scored his last England goal. And a couple from David Platt, who was captain on the night. Alan Shearer also scored as well. It was, Terry's second game in charge. And then the plan was to get one of these motorbike taxis to Heathrow. And I'd booked a ticket for a 3 a.m. flight from Heathrow to Athens. And even with the crowd, and obviously the bikes can get through the traffic, but I looked it up for this conversation, and I think the crowd was not much more than 20,000 at the England game, which is astonishing to think now that Wembley sells out all the time. Anyway,
sorry, got to interrupt. Why do you think that is? Why was the crowd so low in the 1990s? Because for a lot of people now, that would seem completely difficult to appreciate.
Yeah, I haven't got the answer to that. It was low. And
Wembley was a garbage stadium in 1994.
It was coming towards the end of its life, but Terry Venables had been a very popular choice as a manager or head coach. And so I thought that would have carried some sway. Listen, I'm only telling you what I read in the report of the game. If anyone proves me wrong, but it was a low crowd, which must have helped getting on the taxi bike to Heathrow. And I had alerted the airline, as you probably could, it was a bit more personal in those days, that what I was doing, and I was coming and make sure that the check-in time and everything, and I probably got, I don't think you couldn't check in online then or anything like that. But anyway, the flight was scheduled to leave at 3. And that didn't take into account the 2-hour time difference between the UK and Greece. So at 3, it was already 5 a.m. in Greece when I got on the plane. So the going on the back of those bikes is a thrilling experience, actually. They look after you really well, the drivers. They're absolutely top quality motorbike experts. And you obviously have a helmet, you have a microphone, you can talk to the driver if you're saying you're going too fast. In my case, I've got to get there quick, so don't spare the horses. And so that all happened. I guess in May, the weather was probably okay. Sometimes you can go on the back of those bikes and you're in a real rainstorm, and it's not so pleasant then. Anyway, got there, got on the flight. I guess I had a little bit of sleep on the flight, but I can't remember too much about it. Enjoying the game, England won 5-0, and off to see a really high-profile Champions League final between the mites of Serie A and La Liga. So I probably landed, I reckon, about 9 Greek time. It's a 4-hour flight, isn't it? So 9, 9:30. Got to the hotel, got to bed at 11 a.m. on the morning of the match. And I was terrified, of course, that I would oversleep, but I'd got the hotel with alarm calls. That's all I had. I don't think there was no mobile phone alarms then. Anyway, I got up in time, went to the game. Milan won 4-0, which was a big shock.
Let's just talk about that, because these days a lot of people say that Barcelona, Manchester United at Wembley in 2011, the 3-1, was the finest Champions League final performance ever. But a lot of older people would say Milan 4, Barcelona 0 in Greece was the finest.
It was a big shock. I mean, the margin was a big shock. Daniele Massaro was the surprise, not one of the headline players. He got a couple of goals. And your mate scored.
Marcel Desailly.
He did. Yeah, he scored to wrap it up. It was an English referee. And on the flight back the next day, I travelled back with Philip Don and his assistants, which was nice. Because there was, that was the other thing. There was a potential strike at the airport, air traffic controllers. So I wasn't even sure that I'd get there. And any commentators will tell you, I mean, it's a wonderful job. And of course, we are in the public eye as sort of performers commentating. But the nerves about any commentary is, will I get there on time?
Was it Johan Cruyff managing Barcelona still?
I can't remember. 94, it might well have been. Yeah.
I think it probably was, yeah.
And anyway, they were well beaten, no complaints on the day, but the relief that I got to the time for that second game. So doing okay with the first game, getting to the airport, tension, yes. Will the flight be on time? Will it go at all? What about the air traffic controllers? What about if I oversleep in the hotel when I've only gone to bed at 11 o'clock in the morning? It's the sort of thing that you would have done, Neil, many a time for a completely different reason.
Well, I'm coming to that.
And yeah, so I had a 5-0 on the Tuesday and a 4-0 on the Wednesday, and lived to tell the tale.
My trip is in 2012 to Barcelona. In 2012, it was the Champions League semi-final, second leg, and I was working with the club, so I was with the team, but I didn't go to all this sort of team. Well, I didn't hang out with the club stewards, put it that way, or the club officials. Because I wanted a better time. So after I'd finished work, and I'll go back to that work in a moment, on the night before the game, I met up with some Chelsea supporters. There were about 12 of us. And we were all in a state of funeral preparation. Chelsea was 6th in the league, and the team was feeling old. And we'd won the first leg of the semi-final 1-0 against Barcelona, and Barcelona were the best team in the world, and we were going out, and we weren't going to re-qualify for the Champions League for the first time since 2002, not qualifying for the Champions League. And we decided to have a spend-out dinner. for our last trip to Europe for the foreseeable future. And about 12 of us went to this restaurant, which I've written down here, Passadí del Pep. Pep, of course, was manager of Barcelona. I'll come on to that. And it was a fantastic restaurant. Basically, you didn't choose what you had. You gave them, the only choice you had was meat, fish, or I can't remember if it was poultry or vegetarian, the third choice. I remember I chose fish. And then you didn't know what you were getting, and they brought you your meal. And we drank ourselves stupid. We had just unbelievable amounts of food. We then chose our desserts. We then had the choice of after dinner drink. And for some reason that I can't explain, I went from Spanish to Italian, which I never ever do. I always stay in the country where I am with what I consume. And I chose grappa. And they bought me this half bottle of grappa and just put it on the table in front of me. I got hammered. I got absolutely hammered. I was in a terrible state. And I rolled up at the team hotel the following morning. And for ages afterwards, Paulo Ferreira used to remind me of how abysmal I looked in front of everybody that morning. It was awful. However, I had to go out and film a postcard from Barcelona for Chelsea TV. And the night before, I'd been to the press conference and we'd filmed the press conference. It was the most bizarre Barcelona press conference imaginable. And the reason I want to talk about this is because of Manchester City's situation now. Barcelona, for some reason, were falling apart. It was the last season of Pep in charge of Barcelona, and he completely lost it in the press conference. What had happened was that he had fallen out with Piqué, his outstanding central defender, who 2 years previously had got off with Shakira during the World Cup in South Africa and was now totally in love. And Pep felt that he was giving more time to Shakira than he was, or more focus to Shakira than he was to his football career. And I would say to you, Pep, who wouldn't? And
I know some who wouldn't.
He left him out of the first leg, which Chelsea won. But they were falling apart. It was the year that Jose Mourinho won the league with Real Madrid, and Barcelona weren't winning anything, and they were falling apart. So he brought him back for the second leg. And two things happened at the press conference. One was UEFA makes you put up a player, and he put Piqué up. It was extraordinary. Why would you put Piqué up, who hasn't played for weeks, when you're bringing him back and when everyone knows about this fallout? But in his own press conference, which was obviously in Spanish but with an interpreter translating, in his own press conference, he lost it with the Spanish media and he swore at them. Pep. I mean, this was just unbelievable. So I went out the following day with my terrible hangover, did this postcard from Barcelona saying, everything is not right in the Palace of Barcelona. This is a real opportunity to overcome a club that is struggling. And I went through all the reasons why we used bits of the press conference to show it. And I was the only person saying that. And I really believed it. And of course, Chelsea drew 2-2 with 10 men. And no central defenders.
Gary Neville made his famous commentary noise.
Yeah, when
I'm trying to think of the word to describe it. I'll just say a noise, but
well, it was like a whale. It was like a whale snorting. Yeah,
it was a shock and surprise. And
you were about 4 down from me.
I wasn't there. I didn't commentate.
Oh, was it? Well, he was about 4 down from me in the press box, and I vaguely heard it, but I was up on my feet, of course.
I think it might have been Alan Parry he was working with.
Yeah. And so we went through. Funnily enough, I did exactly the same postcard from Munich in the final because Bayern Munich were had lost the league to Dortmund, lost the cup to Dortmund. Jurgen Klopp, manager of Dortmund.
I was there then, and as we've mentioned in every third podcast, I had to sit behind you, watch your emotions unfold in a totally unbiased, unprofessional,
but the extraordinary thing is,
very professional way.
It fell apart for Pep, and in the actual game in the semi-final. I just want to pick out one incident. It was at 0-0. It was a long ball by Chelsea over the top. I don't remember who played it. And it turned into a race between Drogba and Piqué. And Valdés, the Barcelona goalkeeper, came out and chickened out. And he closed his eyes and went to punch the ball. And he punched Piqué. And Piqué had to go off with concussion. So not only did he select Piqué, but in the end he lost him and he went to hospital. I'm sure Shakira was there waiting for him in order to help him through. So
you're saying Guardiola had a fit of pique?
Hey, but what he'd done was he played 3 at the back with wing-backs, and he didn't select Dani Alves, who was the best wing-back to me in the world, apart from Dan Petrescu had stopped playing by then. So he brought Dani Alves on when Piqué went off, but not at wing-back. He played him in the back 3. And I remember saying to whoever I was sitting to, this is falling into our laps. Dani Alves as a back 3 player.
Hang on, there've been a few right wing backs playing at right centre back in recent times.
Yeah, Kyle Walker.
So yeah. I wouldn't say it was. Maybe you had the first sighting of something that we've been.
Well, it didn't work
recently.
It didn't work, and so. But the interesting thing is, if I bring it right up to date, I don't think Pep has lost his stability at Manchester City in a way that he seemed to at Barcelona in 2012. I actually think he looks more capable of dealing with the falling apart of his team this time round. You agree?
Yeah, listen, I have every sympathy with every manager who finds the pressures get to them and behave in an irrational way for a period of time. And when they go back into their office, they go, why on earth did I do that? But you do it because football is everything. And that's, for people like Pep, it's all the decisions, all his life, good moods, bad moods, are all based around the results of his football team and how his football team plays. So I have every sympathy for this loss of control. It's not always excusable, but it's always explainable, I think. And so it's an English way of looking at it, isn't it? We like to see the guys at the top getting toppled from time to time. And we'll come on to that because we're speaking after fourth round FA Cup upsets. And that's not easy for those who are toppled. Their place is being challenged and they've lost a game that they should have won. And Pep's lost a few this season that he would have won normally and should have won perhaps even on the day. So I feel for those, not just specifically for him, but for those who get carried away with the pressure. I've been listening to Ange Postecoglou interviews on the way in, having to deal with constant questioning about disappointing results. And, if you lose a lot, it's hard to come up with explanations. I think he came up with a very good one in the recent interview where he's actually congratulated his players for what they put in. But it's there, it's part of the game. As media, I think we're partly responsible for it because we have a right to ask the questions. We have a right to expect the answers. What we don't probably have a right to do is expect those on the end of our questions to be as in control as we think we are when we're asking the questions at a time so close to the match. That's why the press conferences usually pre-game on the day before are dull as ditch water. The flash interviews at the end, and you and I have both done those in our careers. They're volatile. Anything can happen. You say the wrong word. I remember interviewing Brian Clough. I think I might have mentioned this in an earlier podcast. After he'd lost 2-0 at home to Liverpool with Nottingham Forest, and he told me how good he thought Liverpool were and I sort of tried to sweeten the pill of my question by saying, well, I know you admire Liverpool their way, And he went, Martin, what's that way then? You tell me. Live on television, on terrestrial television, that was. And so there was a roar. I caught him on a corn, didn't I? Trod on a corn. So there we are. It's a great story, and we're very lucky. I'm telling you about going to Greece, and you're talking about going to Barcelona.
Great city.
I probably didn't eat as much food on my trip as you did on yours.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't drink as much.
Grappa. No, don't drink grappa after a Spanish meal. Right, we go on to, we warned you about this last week, our short-term segment, The Way We Were. Now, last week we did it with a load of specific games and what have you. Now we're going to go to a load of clubs getting relegated. Why did it happen? The way we were this week is Tottenham Hotspur in 1977 got relegated. They came up in one season. But Tottenham, the only time since I've been following football that Tottenham are out of the top flight, 77, 78. It was extraordinary. 2 seasons previously, they'd avoided relegation by a point. The season before, they came 9th. For those 2 years, Terry Neal, the Arsenal long-time centre-back, was the manager. He got sacked. Keith Birkinshaw, who was a coach at Tottenham, got promoted to be the manager, but they got relegated in that year. What went wrong at Tottenham in the mid-1970s? We've just got to put it in perspective. In 1974, Manchester United had gone down for a season, so it wasn't unheard of. But, I mean, Tottenham had been winning league. They won the league in 61. They won cups throughout the 60s. What
and
went
in
wrong?
the 70s, League Cup, UEFA Cup.
Yeah.
They were in really good shape. That team probably got a little bit past its best. The young players, including a certain Glenn Hoddle, were given their chance and were just probably a bit too
19,
bit too young to be able to
and
stop
they
the
lost
slide.
a great centre forward in 1976 when his goals dried up, but only at the age of 31, Martin Chivers. But I mean, a lot of Tottenham people would say he's one of their best ever centre forwards.
I would agree with that. And he, funny enough, I've just watched a couple of games from that season. It's wonderful what you can find on the internet, isn't it? They finished bottom and got relegated. It was very tight at the bottom. But their season...
I'll give it to you. There were 22 clubs, 42 games. Tottenham 33 points, Stoke 34, Sunderland 34, all relegated. Coventry 35, and Bristol City in the top flight 35. West Ham 36.
Yeah, the first game they played was away to Ipswich, and they lost. And you think now that they've just lost at home to Ipswich. And I've watched the highlights are online, and they were 1-0 up. And the equaliser was a goal that probably would have been disallowed by VAR now. It was a ball played into the box, and it took a deflection off, not an attempt to play the ball, which would have rendered the offside irrelevant. It was a deflection off a Spurs defender. It went to Mick Lambert and one of the Ipswich attackers, and he scored to make it 1-1. So that it was only the first of 42 games, but sometimes you can spot things. Then at 89th minute, it's still 1-1, and they concede to a 19-year-old forward called Keith Birchin. Oh. And then in the 91st minute, they concede again. So they come away with a 3-1 defeat. They stumbled through those early weeks of the season. Chris Jones had scored the goal, who people probably won't remember at all, who played up front for most of that season. He might have been their leading scorer. I don't think anybody got into double figures.
No, I mean, if you look at their players, goalkeeper Pat Jennings, surely their best ever goalkeeper.
Yeah, he didn't, but he missed the first few games because Barry Daines was playing in this first game. But Pat was there. The other game I saw was a 5-0 defeat, which I think was the game that might have got them down. It was a penultimate game, and they conceded 2 goals from corners. So some things haven't changed. Really.
I mean, Willie Young, a Scottish centre-back who was a big name. Steve Perryman I mean, he was in the prime of his career, aged 25. John Gorman, who became Glenn Hoddle's assistant in many of his managerial posts, was at fullback. Alfie Conn, big signing, and never really did it. Ralph Coates, England regular, 31, was on the wing. Jimmy Neighbour on the other wing. Peter Taylor, Crystal Palace, great, who they'd signed as well. Young Jerry Armstrong, though he wasn't playing so much.
Most of those played a big part in them getting promoted. The next thing, actually, it didn't win what would be the championship these days, the second division. They finished third, I think, and sort of in a way squeaked up. But after that, of course, that took us to 77-78 season, the promotion season, and then in August 1978, they announced the arrival of Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa, straight from winning the World Cup in Argentina, Argentinian internationals. And that lifted the place, and that was unheard of then. Signings from Argentina are two a penny now, but this was a really big statement. And Keith Birkinshaw's football was tremendous. We talked earlier in the podcast about the opposite of what you play is how you manage. And Keith was a wing half, stroke defensive wing half, and not known for flamboyant football. But the football Tottenham played under him was special and very successful.
But how could a club of that size go down?
Well, everyone was getting paid the same officially, or pretty much the same. There wasn't that much difference in the way. It wasn't huge business. It was far more democratic then, really. If you didn't win enough games, you got relegated. I mean, there was no transfer window set until March, so you could buy your way out of trouble in February and at this time of year. Just the chemistry was wrong, and they put their trust in Keith, and they stuck with him, which is what Spurs had a reputation for doing. As Bill Nicholson had been manager for decades, it seemed.
Just to give you the management, Bill Nicholson was 1958 to 1974, so that era had come to an end. Terry Neal, 74 to 76, who then went to his old club Arsenal and managed them from 76 to 83. You couldn't do that now. I mean, supporters wouldn't.
Well, George Graham did.
But George Graham went
now, is it? I understand.
No, he went to Tottenham in the late 1990s, and of course is the last but one manager to win a trophy for them. And then Keith Birkinshaw was 76 till 84, so 8 years. I mean,
and they ended up winning a European trophy in that last season, didn't they, as well? So it happens. It smacks of a bit of carelessness, I suppose, but it wasn't so much the end of the world. I mean, as you say, Manchester United had gone down. There was Chelsea had gone down. And
we weren't a big club. Chelsea weren't a big club.
But clubs with name. They were a big club in the sense of being in the West End of London.
But
we had a lot of media interest in the club.
We had a history of a bit like West Ham of not always being in the top five.
But it's only really like Arsenal and Everton, and obviously Liverpool since they went up in the 60s under Bill Shankly. I mean, it's quite a feat. So if there's one season blot on the horizon, and goodness me, they bounce back to good effect. Of course, if Tottenham were to go down, and I'm sure they won't, but if they were to go down in this kind of environment, that would be much more forensically analysed. Villa went down. I mean,
they're going to be one of our spotlights in this series. Do you think, looking back, that anyone actually took the blame in a way that if they went down now, they couldn't get away with no one taking the blame?
I think they accepted it as that's life, It was much more of football life then. I mean, we were still in the era of 2 points for a win, weren't we, as well, which obviously condensed the league a bit more. I was around, I was working when it happened. I tried to say, I don't think I did any commentary of the games in the second division, but it certainly was seemingly as hard to get out of as it is to get out of now. I think the wannabes are one of the great strengths of English football. Everyone's striving to get that, but the finances weren't so that you lost so much by doing it. And the TV deals were numbers scribbled on the back of an envelope by BBC and ITV chief executives of sport, and there was nothing. And also you had to be covered second division and lower divisions as well, so you got some exposure. It was a wake-up call, really. and they woke up.
Look over your shoulder, Tottenham fans. Don't forget, if you're liking this podcast, to subscribe or to put your likes down there or shove something in down the bottom in the description. Do whatever you want, but do whatever you want anyway. Stay here, because we've got coming up Letter from the Gantry, Voice of Passion, 3 of the best comparisons, where we're dealing with, well, we're going to go to the Midlands first of all, in Letter from the Gantry by Martin Tyler.
Letter from the Gantry.
As always, thanks, Neil, for that rousing introduction. My FA Cup fourth-round commentary game was full of incident and excitement. Birmingham City versus Newcastle United. The contest was set up by a goal after just 40 seconds for the Blues from right-back Ethan Laird. And later in the first half, I had to find the right words for an absolute stunner from the Japanese midfield player Tomoki Iwata, which made it 2-2. Truly one of the best strikes of its kind I have ever seen. Newcastle had levelled at 1-1 with a was-it-over-the-line equaliser awarded to Joe Willock. With no goal line technology present, it was given on an assistant referee's flag. Soon afterwards, they went 2-1 up, a first Callum Wilson goal of the season, finally, after so many injury setbacks. And it only came about when his teammate, Will Osula, astonishingly miskicked the ball off the line with no opponent near him, rather than over the line to score himself. Surely one of the strangest ever assists. The only goal in the second half, and the decider, was a second for Willock. Eddie Howe made 9 changes from his Carabao Cup semi-final success in midweek, but unlike Liverpool at Plymouth, his backups were more experienced. Where there is a Will, Osula had 2 assists, a Wilson and a Willock. There was a way into the 5th round. It brought back memories of my very first commentary at St Andrews, coincidentally also in the 4th round of the FA Cup back in 1977. It was my debut campaign for Yorkshire Television, and our cameras followed Leeds United into the second city. Like this season, the tie produced an away win, though unlike now, both clubs were in the top division. Leeds won 2-1, but it was the Birmingham goal that has stuck in my mind. Wheeling off in celebration was Birmingham's superstar in the making, Trevor Francis, who'd announced himself by scoring 4 goals in a league game when he was only 16. He would win the first of his 52 England caps just a month after the Leeds Cup tie. But before I could launch myself into praising his talents, I spotted that at the opposite corner of the penalty area there were similar celebrations of joy from another Birmingham player, Kenny Burns. Burns was already a Scotland international and mixed a very successful career as a tough defender with spells when he played up front, and this was one such game. The limited angle of the replays didn't provide a definitive answer. Both players seemed to make simultaneous contact with the ball. I think I sat on the fence as I sat on the St Andrews Gantry. Though I was pretty new to the job, I had a good knowledge of the 2 claimants of the goal. Trevor was a tremendous competitor, but disguised that edge in an understated, almost gentle personality. Burns was tough as teak and would be the louder voice in any post-match dressing room discussion about whose goal it was. Looking it up now in the record books, I was not surprised to learn that the goal has gone down to the Scot. Burns moved on to Nottingham Forest at the end of that season. Francis would follow for a record fee. Both won the European Cup. There were no signs of any hard feelings. Trevor sadly is no longer around to update the issue, but in the ground for the Newcastle game, the cameras spotted one of his very best friends, the comedian Jasper Carrott, a true Birmingham Blue. Not present on Super Bowl weekend was the club's celebrity investor, Tom Brady. My co-commentator was Clive Allen, a prolific goalscorer in his time, of course, but also a former kicker for the London Monarchs. Clive knows his NFL and was aware that the legendary quarterback was scheduled for commentary duty a day later. Now, our coverage from St Andrews went to the USA, so we wondered on air whether he was watching, and broadcaster to broadcaster, we did wish him well. Birmingham are playing in the 3rd tier of English football for only a 5th season in their entire history. But the ambition of the club's new owner, Tom Wagner, has created a real positivity around the club. He has plans for a new 60,000 capacity stadium and is working with the council to regenerate a part of Birmingham which badly needs investment. As far as the football club is concerned, he's already been true to his word. Though he's employed 5 managers in his short tenure, he has backed the current incumbent, Chris Davis. Striker Jay Stansfield was bought from Fulham for a reported £15 million, almost 4 times the previous highest fee paid by a third-tier club. Birmingham are out of the FA Cup, but they're 1 game away from Wembley in the EFL Trophy, and in very good shape for their main priority, that push for promotion. With their new faces, I think they're going places.
Birmingham. Let me just give you the top of the League One as it stands, because they're romping away with it, Birmingham. They've got 63 points from 27 games. Second, Wycombe Wanderers, 59 points from 29. Third, Wrexham, promoted, of course, 55 points from 29 American owners.
The Wrexham Birmingham games are screened live to the United States.
Fourth,
and you understand why.
Fourth, Stockport County, 53 points from 30 games. And interestingly, 5th to 8th, all former Premier League clubs. 5th, Huddersfield, 6th, Charlton, 7th, Bolton, 8th, Reading, all former.
That's the pyramid.
Yeah, and of course Birmingham, a former Premier League club as well.
And a trophy winner this century.
2011.
Yeah. With actually a goal, I mentioned it in the commentary of the Newcastle game, Obafemi Martins, better known in English football for playing for Newcastle. Yeah. He hardly played in that cup run. I think he played about 10 or 12 minutes in that run to the Carabao Cup, and they beat Arsenal and finally scored the winner. And those were his 12 minutes, and he's a legend now at Birmingham City.
And at that point, Arsenal hadn't won a trophy, I think, since 2006. So it was 5 years. I was there, actually, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And Alex McLeish was the manager of Birmingham, but they got relegated, so he left. But because they'd won a trophy, he got the Aston Villa job.
Yeah, just a word on that. The support at Birmingham seemed to be had a hint of old school about it.
Well, it's an old school ground.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is. It looks very much the same as it always did. But Matt Targett played for Newcastle. Hasn't played very much because of a lot of injuries. But in his career, he did have a spell at Aston Villa. Yeah. And the Blues fans, even in the 90th minute, while Birmingham were trying to get an equaliser and take it to extra time, every time Matt got the ball, you knew the Villa came. So they had good memories. And that's, you don't always hear that now. But Matt Targett made one of a number of Newcastle players who actually was brought into the team, but had the experience to carry the day.
In the quarterfinals of the FA Cup in 1968, it was Birmingham versus Chelsea, and I went up with my dad, and he bought 2 tickets. It was an all-ticket game to stand in a paddock from who was the fat guy who was the ticket tout, the famous fat guy, Stan Flashman, the amazingly perfectly named.
That was his real name, but it was Stan a great Flashman. Name for what he did.
Yeah. Really. We bought 2 tickets off Stan Flashman, and we stood in the paddock, and about 20 minutes from time, Birmingham scored 1-0 with a goal, a throw-in from Bert Murray, bought from Chelsea, a cross from Barry Bridges, bought from Chelsea, and a header from Fred Pickering, bought from Everton, and it was just these old guys who put one over us. And for the last 10 minutes, I remember, how old would I have been? I'd have been 14, I think. For the last 10 minutes, I prayed for an equaliser, and it didn't come, and I've been an atheist ever since. There you go. In the last year, because of the American owners, League One has spent a record amount on transfer fees. Is that a good thing?
Well, at some point, there is a club near me, the first club I ever coached at, actually, Walton and Hersham, who are in the pyramid. They have now American money coming in. I've seen an Instagram post from their owner talking about his ambitions. We're going to get in the Football League. I guess in the end, the realization of how difficult all this might stop the colonisation of English football from the United States. But at the moment, they're coming in droves, and
it's a form. Is it a form of imperialism? What's happening to our football clubs with Americans taking them over, basically to make money?
I think they do want to make money, but I have to say the Birmingham. I mean, that's big business. They don't have to regenerate the area. I mean, of course, you can make more money if you're not just a football club. You're investing in a city, which Tom Wagner and his hedge fund backers are mega rich, and there is something about it. I mean, the Birmingham fans. He did a hello. Is that Chelsea crossing the ball from back in 1911?
Yeah, that's the old ball that's just fallen down. Signed by Bobby Tamling, 202 goals, and obviously not been blown up since he last kicked it.
Well, we've got an old ball and two old boys here, but we're going to keep going. So I have to say, Tom Wagner did a half-time. He came back from the directors walking around. It was a walk of... We've seen it from other owners before. We're going to talk about one actually later on. This sort of public, not hiding away like, say, Abramovich did, but fronting up and goodness me, it was a standing ovation for him. So there will be good ones and there'll be not so good ones. And I think we have to embrace it and take the positives out of but make sure, and I'm really, really strong on this, make sure that the proper checks are done, because it's all very well having the money, and it's very hard to investigate this, but you have to really work as to where the money has come from in the first place.
And you have to be certain that they are buying into the principles of what makes European football so attractive. And that includes the pyramid, and not American sports with the NFL, with the MLS, and with the NBA, where you don't have relegation.
If a message to America, if you really want to regenerate your sports, start building a pyramid in them. There's no reason at all why you can't have one.
Well, there is. There isn't. There is, because in MLS, if you are a new franchise club, the first thing you have to do is put in an investment of $150 million. I think you pay that to the MLS, actually.
That's nothing.
You pay it to the MLS.
For the American monies we're talking about, that is nothing. Yeah. Create, and you don't, and make MLS 2, 3, and 4. You don't have to put that money in. You have to put money commensurate to the level that you're in.
Yeah, but the MLS is making money. Everyone's making money. That's what it's all about.
They're not making footballers. So make football more competitive.
Hear that, USA.
They're not.
Right, which brings us on to Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
Which, of course, will be met by Martin's Voice of Reason. Right, I'm absolutely furious. I am furious. And this is the reason. This new ownership, by the way, of Premier League clubs in particular, if you look around, and nobody's talking about this enough, if you look around, there are more empty seats than there have been in the last 20 years at football stadium. I was at Brighton on Saturday evening for the Brighton-Chelsea Cup tie. Brighton didn't sell out against
the
Chelsea.
FA Cup, and you have to pay on top of your season
for all their
tickets.
tickets. And of course,
you're going again this Friday. Come back and tell me how many of those seats are empty for
because
Premier
Chelsea
League
are playing them in the league. But the point being that they didn't have to sell as many seats because the away end has twice the number of seats because it's the FA Cup. And really strange. So I want to bring... Now, a lot of people know I've been banned from press boxes, of which I'm very proud.
I thought it was just the one you were banned from.
I seem to have been banned from all of them as a result. But
has the podcast anything to do with this?
No. I just like to say though, badge of honour, because what I said was true. But I sit now in the middle tier at Chelsea in the old East Stand, which is a corporate ticket, and everyone to one side of me has stopped coming. I have half a row empty. They're more expensive seats than mine, a lot more expensive.
So they have been paid for?
Yeah, probably. But what is happening, and this is happening with a lot of owners, not just American owners, is there are more and more corporate seats, and a lot of them aren't sold, of course, to individuals. They're sold to businesses. They're sold to people who resell them. I mean, it's a form of, if you like, corporate ticket touting, but the clubs wouldn't recognise that. So at Chelsea, like at Manchester City and like at Manchester United, all these clubs now, they have these clubs where you can get closer to the players, and they're the most expensive seats. At Chelsea, it's called the Dugout Club, but it's not just my club that's doing it. But the Dugout Club is put behind the manager's dugout, so you can get a really close view of what's going on. Because in American sports, the closer you are to the pitch, the closer you are to the celebrities, the more expensive the seats are. Obviously, in football in Europe, the more expensive seats are where you get the best view of the game, which would be a middle tier.
But there's like the Tunnel Club at Manchester City, isn't there? Which is
exactly.
the same principle.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And they were the first club to do it. But I looked up the prices of the Dugout Club, and as I say, it's a restricted view, for God's sake, because you've literally got the manager's dugout in front of you.
But anybody, let me get clear, Neil, anybody listening or watching this can buy if they've got that kind of money.
Yeah.
You don't have a membership or anything like that.
No. So the Dugout Club, these are the forthcoming games, home games at Stamford Bridge. And this is to be behind the Chelsea dugout. It's a different price to be behind the away dugout. Against Southampton, it's a mere £2,050 a ticket. Against Tottenham, it's £6,000 a ticket. Against Ipswich, it's a mere £2,500 a ticket. But what really made me bring this up this week are the next two games on sale are Liverpool and Manchester United. And Chelsea are charging £12,500 a ticket.
They've underpriced the Tottenham game.
Not the way Tottenham are playing now.
No, but the rivalry is they didn't realise that.
Yeah.
But
at this point, Tottenham fans can like this podcast. You're getting it cheap. 12,500. This is the way that money-making ownership has gone. Now, if I know what would happen, because I understand how American sports are run, having broadcast in USA for so long, and maybe it's not a bad thing. I think it is, but maybe it's not. But their thinking will be, if we sell 2 tickets at £12,500, that's 25 grand. We would have to sell 50 tickets at £50 to get 12.5 grand. No, 500 tickets. Let me get my maths right. We would have to sell 500 tickets at £50 to get 5.5 grand. So it makes sense to sell it at that, because we only need to sell 2 and we're in money. But it's just a kick in the face for this sport that has become so expensive to follow for the most part. And it will create empty seats. And those used to be cheaper seats, because they're restricted view. Of course you get to go and have a meal beforehand. Of course you get a first team member or a first team player coming and talking to you afterwards. You get a famous name coming and talking to you afterwards, analysing the game, Gary Cahill, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank at Weybridge, somebody like Dennis Wise, somebody like that. And this is what all the clubs are doing now. But this is 12.5 grand for one game. 25 grand for 2 people to go together. And I say it's undermining how supporters support a club when this happens.
Well, it's a global game, and these are global fans, and the whole Todd Boehly thing about this ticket agency where you can't buy the tickets from England, but they are somehow arriving in this agency where if you're in the United States, and it's not just the rich guys that are coming. After the Chelsea Wolves game, which I commentated on a few weeks ago, I was stopped in the street by 3 really very personable young guys from South Korea. They had, they clearly weren't, of the elite. They had obviously some backing. I said, "Oh, you must live over here. You're studying over here. What are you doing?" They said, "No, we've just come over for the weekend. It's our first Chelsea game." and they'd been to another game somewhere else, and they got in. And if the locals are priced out, if the tourists pay, then the owners will just say, well, we'll have the tourists. Now, that's a very finely balanced business decision, I would think, because who knows what's going to happen with travel, with the world as it is, the unstable nature of certain areas in the world. Are people going to be able to leave their country for nice weekends in London to watch Chelsea, or nice weekends in Manchester or Liverpool or Newcastle, wherever they're going? Whereas if they live around the corner, if they live in commuter land like you do, it's, people are still going to come. Now, if you're going to get rid of them, I was going to use a different expression, but unlike you, I moderate my language in this podcast. But if they get angry...
Oh, don't you worry, Martin. You know me well. I moderate my language big time.
That's true, actually. You still get what you get. But it's very short term. But listen, I've been talking in my television industry about what could happen in the future. And one of the things I'm very frightened of is this 3 o'clock thing going. Where
the 3 o'clock thing
3 o'clock being the UEFA rule, where you can't broadcast live in this country because they protect the pyramid. They're working very hard at the top level. Nobody from the foreign owners understand it. They want to break it down, get rid of it, and that means the consequence of that is 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, when all the other teams are playing, local teams playing, pyramid different levels are playing. That you can sit home and watch a Premier League game of your choice. So the kids will grow up, oh, football's on, I'll watch that. Well, why should I go down the road to watch something? I can sit here and watch it and live my life as youngsters do today. So I think that's a terrifying thing. The more terrifying thing that I've heard, and this is just speculation, that it will be possible for you to pick your seat at Chelsea and watch the game from that seat on your television screen. Yeah. And that seat will be sold tens of thousands of times because no one's going to get in the way of you. You're still watching it. The guy down the street is watching it. The guy in Japan's watching it. They can all pick their seats. So people won't even have to go to the games to get the kind of experience that the Tunnel Club is offering now, except Gary Cahill won't be able to go to around 10,000 homes, although I know some people who go around about 20 executive boxes to do their job explain. But imagine if that happens then, and it's pretty close, the technology to being available to do that. Where will we go then? But then the consumer on the ground, the locals, will benefit because they'll have to fill the ground.
I went to a game.
You'll get in for buttons then.
I went to a game, a Champions League game in 2017 in Rome. I won't revisit the game. Chelsea got thrashed by Roma. But I went with my son, and we went for lunch before the game to a wonderful Italian, obviously, restaurant with a bunch of American executives who were attending the game. And their forecasting, there was one guy there who had a clear vision of how football experience would change. And one of the things, my son keeps going back and back and back to this lunch and saying, everything's happening that guy said. And one of the things he said, I remember, was in years to come, you'll be able to sit at a game with a monitor on the back of the seat in front of you, and you'll be able to bet during the game from your seat within the stadium. Now, you could do it on your phone if you could get a signal now.
But you can't get on Wi-Fi, can you?
No.
Grounds,
it's improving because clubs tend to have their own Wi-Fi's now, but it's very hard. But
you can sit with, there's monitors all over the ground now, so you know, you don't have to be in the press box now. The executives, they have. I was privileged to be a guest at Southampton and was in the director's box, and they had monitors.
Yeah. And these kind of things, basically the game is going to get taken away from the 90-minute experience of being totally focused on the game, and it's going to be full of other things, and of course it will come into your home in the same way. And everything that this guy was forecasting, with the understanding of technology and the understanding of preferable consuming, seems to be happening, and it's frightening. It's
But
absolutely frightening.
But I'll throw one thing: the social side of life is very important, and meeting your heroes is one thing that happens in football. If you go to the grounds, you might not meet them at the Premier League grounds, but certainly plenty of opportunities, even hanging around the car park.
Yeah.
I mean, I live very close to the Chelsea training ground. There are people in every day of the week waiting for the current Chelsea players to come out who are not supposed to stop and sign for safety reasons, but they do because they feel compassion for those who've spent their time waiting for it. And so I do think that there will be a balancing act of it. And of course, football cannot allow empty. It won't work with empty grounds.
No.
So it's a struggle now. There are a lot of games
and that's
being
why
covered at
for
lower
years
levels
Serie A has fallen off the top
Yeah.
of the attraction because their grounds are so poor and they don't have enough full stadium.
But all I would say at the end of the Tunnel Club rant, you started this podcast by telling us how you went to a Birmingham game with a ticket bought off a tout. And I'm not quite sure how you square that experience with your criticism of what Chelsea are doing.
Oh, you old woman. Bloody hell. Martin Tyler. That was a chauvinist comment. I withdraw it. But
you can't say that anyway. You can't say what you just said anyway. That's not correct.
No, I withdraw it totally. But
Call me something better than that.
Old fart.
That'll do. But there you go. I mean, what goes around comes around in this podcast.
Yeah, no. But yeah, you have to go. You have to get there. I'm a supporter, one way or another. You have to get there, and that's what you do.
If you were in a position to afford the Tunnel Club tickets, and that was the only way you were going to go, you would pay it.
Yeah, but I'll never be in that position. I don't ever want to be because it's a restricted view. I want a good view. Right, enough of passion. On to analysis. This is 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay. And that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
Young player, old player, player. 1 each. Martin, young player.
I'm going to go in-house for this one. The Woking Academy had a tough time of it recently, trying to make ends meet. But one way it justifies its existence is producing players. And we've got a lad called Tom Dreyer, who's only 17, who last week has been put out on loan to a club in the Pyramid. And he came on as a substitute. The club's called Westfield, which is very near Woking, just across the park, actually. And he made 2 goals to turn a 1-0 deficit. Leatherhead are quite famous for their cup runs in the past. Westfield won 2-1 at Leatherhead. He made both goals as a substitute, so he got a start in the weekend's game and scored in a 2-1 win. So he's showing that men's football, which just go back to make it topical with Arne Slot saying his starlets at Liverpool don't play enough men's football. Well, Tom's gone into men's football and he's actually played a few minutes in Woking's first team, but it was against Derby County under-21s in that National Cup that's been brought in this season. But it's first team football. He's got a squad number for the first team and he represents hundreds of boys who are showing them what can be achieved. So good luck to him. He's got a long way to go, but he's had a good week.
My youngster is Brighton's Jorginho Ruta. The crowd chant his name, Jorginho, all through the game. I've seen him twice this season, once at Stamford Bridge where he scored with a header, playing on the right side, right wing in a 4-2-3-1, and once at the Amex at the weekend where Brighton knocked Chelsea out of the cup, where he played number 10, and he scored a goal and he made a goal. The goal he scored was an excellent header. The goal he made was a beautifully, technically first touch pass for Mitoma to score. 22 years old, they paid Leeds £40 million for him, by a mile, Brighton's record signing. Now, Brighton, down the years, of course, are this club that's made their character buying young, improving players, selling them on. I spoke earlier in the season to one of their directors, Brighton, and said, would you ever think of, this was just conversation, not for an article or anything, would you ever think of adding a tier to the ground, going for a bigger attendance and trying to get into Europe regularly. And he said, "We're a town. Brighton's a town. It's not a city. It's not going to happen. We haven't got that kind of base. We are doing our absolute maximum year in, year out now, and we are totally reliant on the way we work, and we will continue to work that way." Well, of course, last summer they've made so much money, not least out of my club, that they didn't have to sell anyone last summer, and they just spent a record amount of money. And Ruta is someone who, quite frankly, he'd had, a year and a half at Leeds, something like that. 2 years, signed from Hoffenheim, where he went from his French club, where he started out. He's a French player. He made little impression on me until he joined Brighton. But £40 million, settled well. And I think second half of the season, I'm looking for something special from him. He looks a talent. He looks a real talent. Last season at Leeds, he got 8 league goals and something like 16 assists. Player.
Well, you'll see again. You've got another chance to watch him coming up
Friday.
And that was a great comeback from losing 7-0 at Nottingham Forest, even though it hurt you.
Yeah. Mm. Old player.
Well, this is somebody that I only encountered over the weekend, Miran Muslic, who is the manager, head coach of Plymouth Argyle, getting all the headlines, all the praise. It will be pointed out in the smaller print that Liverpool didn't have their strongest team, but that was their choice. And they had an injury early in the game. That was unlucky. It can take nothing away from what Plymouth did on his watch. He's only been there a few weeks. He watched the win at Brentford. People tend to forget that they'd knocked down Brentford in the previous round. He watched that, and he got the vibes of the place, the players. He's put a structure into the team. He's only 42. His life was tough. He was a refugee, 9 years old, from the conflict in the Balkans, and literally had to grab what they could from the house and get out on the run. A terrible way to start a young life, and
he was Bosnian.
Yeah, Bosnian. Yeah, and football has given him what he believes today. He's 42. He was born on September the 14th, which always gave him a chance in life. And so
whose birthday is that?
Well, it's Dominic Solanke's, Ray Wilkins, God rest his soul, and yours truly.
Yeah.
And I thought he conducted. He was his. Way he spoke about before the game, where he didn't know he was going to make history. After the game, just superbly eloquent, and said all the right things, as Arne Slot did, I have to say, who took the defeat with great dignity. But he did point out, and it's something that's resonated with us, men's football, and his boys looked like boys. That was their choice, and Plymouth put up this defensive masterclass, and the structure that he's put in place. Miran Muslic must be applauded. Wish him well. Whether it'll work to keep them in the Championship, I hope it does. But what a day! It was a day for everybody who loves football. I've had messages from around the world, from my football contacts around the world, people who didn't think I didn't commentate on the game, but how much it resonated. The FA Cup alive and well.
I wonder how many people watched just the last 20 minutes, because that's all I watched. I think that's about what you watched.
No, I watched from 10 minutes in, but I had members of my family coming in who wouldn't have watched it, who wouldn't have stuck with it, would have gone to another room in the house, and they stuck with it. And
our producer boys, I think you all watched it for about 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Yeah. I wonder how many people did.
It was a pilgrimage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are 3 clubs in Devon, 3 Football League clubs, Exeter, Torquay and Plymouth, and they are Exeter not so bad, but the other 2 are a long way past Exeter. They're
Torquay's
difficult.
Not a Football League club, I'm delighted to tell you.
Oh, no, of course it's not. Yeah.
The big rivalry with Torquay. We've had some fantastic games with them.
But it's a long way to get to. And for them, all away games are a long way away apart from against their fellow county players. And it's just, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I've only been there once, Plymouth.
It's a rugby area.
To the game.
Mostly it's a rugby area.
To the ground.
But you saw the support. Fans in tears at the end. You know, it was
brilliant.
Amazing. And whatever was on the team sheet, they still had to beat them. But I do think that when that team sheet went into the home dressing room and they saw who Liverpool were putting out, they must have thought they had more of a chance. Whether that was from tiny chance to just a little bit bigger than tiny, but they took their chance, and really memorable, brilliant. I was watching it. I think you don't see many teams playing green, really, do you? There's sometimes a second strip, but it was the green lights for Plymouth Argyle.
My old player is Frank Lampard. Frank Lampard, who in 2001 moved from West Ham to Chelsea for £11 million, which in those days was an awful lot of money, and most people reckoned was far too much to pay for him.
That was pre-Abramovich, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why am I choosing him? Well, I've just talked about Jorginho Ruta, who seems to have landed with his feet running and in good readiness at Brighton. But we talk so much about the need to adapt, especially if you move country, especially if you move language, so many reasons to adapt. Frank Lampard moved from the East End of London to the West End of London in 2001. In his first season, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't extraordinary. He was ordinary. He got about 6 goals, and he took his time to adapt. He said many years afterwards that he found it really hard moving from the East End to the West End, moving out from his parents' home, and despite a good education, which has been well covered in the media, going to private school, if that is a good education. But he just found the move into living on his own in the West End of London and the different lifestyle in the West End to the East End very, very challenging. And it took him a year to adapt. And in his second season, he started to look an extraordinary player and become the world-class player that he became. But Frank Lampard, from the East End to the West End, struggled to adapt for a year. And I just think that often too much is expected of people when they move clubs too quickly. And if you don't give them the time, then it won't happen. And I think too often now, players are rejected when things go wrong. And, whether it's Marcus Rashford, whether it's Jadon Sancho, you've got to give people the chance to adapt. And I don't think it's done enough. Frank Lampard is evidence of that. Player.
Yes. I've gone for a game that I saw. Joe Willock of Newcastle United, who scored 2 of the 3 goals and had a really energetic display. If you remember, he's 25 now, I think. He broke into Arsenal's squad, got a few games, and mostly in the minor cup ties, and then went to Newcastle on loan, and I think scored what I would call now of Isak proportions in terms of scoring game after game after game as a midfield player. And of course it led to a permanent move and plenty of first team appearances after that. But he has not been such a regular goal scorer as he was on that loan period. And this season he struggled to get in the team. He's always been on the bench. He's always been on the team sheet, but he hasn't really had a season to remember. And then he, with all the changes that Eddie Howe made for the game at Birmingham, he was obviously a shoo-in to come in. But his performances and his goals got them through to the next round of the FA Cup. And what I loved about it was the way at the end the after-match interviews were done. All the Newcastle players that were interviewed said how pleased they were for Joe, that he has stuck at it. He never really complained, certainly not complained in the media about his treatment. He obviously believes he should be in the team. They've got, without Europe, maybe the fixtures, there was less chance to break in, but of course they've got to the League Cup final, and he's been involved in that. Whether he'll start, of course, we'll wait and see. But that would have done him no harm at all. And I think you talk about the personality of people. I mean, I know what it was like for him to move from from London to the northeast of England. It was a big move, but I'm sure he was welcomed, settled in. He had the loan spell, so he knew what he was going back to in a permanent move. But you can feel a bit alone sometimes when you're not in the team. And it takes a bit of guts to come out and produce your A game when you do get the minutes. And that's what football is. That's where we talk about the brutality of managers getting sacked and players getting moved on and this, that and the other. The brutality is you've got to make the most of what you get given in terms of playing on the pitch. And he certainly did that. So it was a proper performance from Joe. And in a very tight and very exciting game, he was on the right side.
My player this week is Andy Robertson, Liverpool, who didn't play, of course, at the weekend because he was one of the senior
players. It's funny,
players.
I just stop you there because I went for a walk before we talk about the Plymouth game and watching it. I was out in the morning for a walk and in Richmond, by the river in Surrey, and running along behind my house. I only saw one football shirt. One guy, and it was a kid doing about 15. And I thought, he's got a Liverpool top on. And he ran past me, and on the back was 26 Robertson. So that was sort of a new... I didn't know that you were going to mention him like that.
In the first third of the season, he was basically written off and buried. He's making too many mistakes. He's played too much football. His legs have gone. He's not the same player. And in the time since... he's not really been talked about. Tsimikas got injured and then basically he's just not nearly the player that Robertson is. And since that first third of the season, every time I've watched Liverpool, he's not made mistakes. He's been one of the best players on the pitch and he's been back to being one of the best, if not the best left back in the Premier League. Now, if I look at the best left backs this season, Kirkhev at Bournemouth, despite their struggles, Gvardiol's had a terrific season for Manchester City at left back. Fulham fans are so excited about Robinson now, the USA left back born in Milton Keynes, brought up in Liverpool.
Yeah, and with a Scouse accent.
But I would argue that since that first third of the season, Andy Robertson has probably been the best left back.
I tell you who is doing very well, Lewis Skelly. He does look to the manner born. Of course,
he's not a left back.
No, he's not. He's a midfield player. Maybe that's the way we've got to talk about fullbacks moving to midfield. Maybe he's a perfect fit. He's not played enough games for the judgment.
Lewis Hall's doing the same thing on the midfielder turns left back. Yeah. But I just think, again, as I said about Lampard, you've got to give him time to adapt. You've got to let top players come out of a trough. Because if they do, they can be a top player again. And I think Andy Robertson is arguably at the moment the best left back in the Premier League.
Yeah, it was interesting that your game in the FA Cup at Brighton, Tariq Lamptey played left back for Brighton and was given the man of the match by the television coverage.
Who's not really got a left foot and came in and did the midfield thing and was involved in both goals.
So it's a very important position in the team, and but Andy Robertson's he's a really good guy. He always fronts up when things, and not that things have gone very wrong very often in his time at Liverpool, but when they had that run of not wanting to win at home, he was always the one that was wheeled out, and he never neglected his media duties. Top guy.
Right, we're going to have a very quick last segment here. Well, there's still stoppage time to come. Comparisons! And this week's comparisons is not player against player, it's club against club. The four clubs are Cardiff, Bradford City, Wigan and Plymouth. And they are the four clubs from outside the Premier League who have
knocked the current Premier League leaders at that time out of the FA Cup.
And we have witnessed all this because in 2002, Cardiff City 2, Leeds United 1 was commentated on by
me, yeah. It was at a time when that was when Leeds, Peter Ridgedale and Leeds were really going for glory, overspending as it turned out, but were doing very well in Europe as well. And they went to Cardiff. And
this was the days of Rio Ferdinand and then Alan Smith.
Mark Viduka, I think he played. And they, Cardiff had a go. And this was the Cardiff ownership had passed into the hands of Sam Hammam, who'd made his name as the owner of the Crazy Gang at Wimbledon. And he caught the headlines and certainly caught the cameras by standing in the Cardiff fans during the game and adding to, I suppose, the raucous atmosphere that made Leeds second best on the day.
Well, not only that, he had an altercation with the BBC reporter, Sam, and with David O'Leary, the Leeds manager, afterwards. So he was in top form, top form. Viduka gave Leeds the lead, but Cardiff came back and won 2-1.
Yeah, it was a thrilling game, and Cardiff were very kind to me. I say this often on this podcast. The amount of help I've had within football, people trusting me to keep the information to myself until it's relevant to talk about it. I went to see Cardiff train on the Saturday morning, and funny enough, in the afternoon, I was down in South Wales, and I thought I'd go and see Swansea. Swansea were in League Two and almost dropping out of the league. And then within goodness knows how many, they're in the Premier League. Yeah. So I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what a famous club. Swansea produced all these great players in my early years of following football. And then they had a renaissance, and then Cardiff the next day went out and did this, which was, it was a surprise. I think Alan Cork was involved, I remember, who of course had won the FA Cup as a player with Wimbledon. It was special. I mean, we, all respect to the big clubs who've been knocked out in these stories, but it's what the FA Cup is, as they say about it. It does have its magic, and we've seen that sprinkled in there very, very recently, and I'm sure there will be more to come.
In 2015, it was Chelsea 2, Bradford 4. I was there. Chelsea went on to win the league, of course, but it was also the beginning of troubles for that Jose Mourinho team. Mourinho second time round at Chelsea. And Bradford had 2 youth rejects from Chelsea in the team. And that made such a significant difference to their attitude. They had outstanding games, both of them.
They were?
Pass. Can't remember names. Sorry.
It wasn't Junior Marias.
Junior Marias.
Junior Marias has just signed for Woking.
Has he?
Yes.
Oh, will you give him my best wishes?
Yes.
I think we follow each other on social media.
Right. Well, you can now officially wish him luck.
Yeah. Give him my best wishes. Bradford deserved to win the game. Yes. That's all I'm saying. And it was a shock. Mourinho didn't quite know how to respond to it when Bradford suddenly.
Phil Parkinson, the manager.
Yeah.
Who's now manager of Wrexham.
Yeah.
Another guy has been extremely helpful to me down the years.
We then go on to 2018, when it was a repeat of the 2013 FA Cup final, but in 2013 at the Cup final, the league leaders or the league champions were Manchester United. In 2018, the league leaders were the same opposition, Manchester City. Wigan won, Manchester City 0, and the commentator on the game was?
Well, I was one of a number of commentators on the game, and it was the same score as the FA Cup final, with lots of comparisons being made. It was quite hostile, I seem to remember. There were some altercations either at the end or at half-time. There was a camera, one of these sort of drone-like cameras.
Full-time. Unedifying scenes at full-time. Sergio Aguero involved in an altercation with one of the many home fans who invaded the pitch.
I think Peter Reid was involved with Wigan at the time, and he had his say in the tunnel. I'm sure I remember that. But
ex-Manchester City manager.
Yeah, of course. Dan Burn played, who now, of course, I saw play at the weekend. He was one of the 2 players that Eddie Howe kept in the team. Bruno Guimaraes was the other from the team that had beaten Arsenal in the Carabao Cup semi-final. So, so Dan he had a topsy-turvy career. He's finally ended up in his spiritual home. He's from the northeast, but he was a big man in that. And Christian Walton was the goalkeeper who's played in the Premier League this season for Ipswich against Chelsea.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So, it was one of those where you think, has the big club taken it quite as seriously as they should? I mean, Wigan, with their decline from their Premier League status, finding it hard to fill the ground.
But they were mid-table championship side. They weren't like Plymouth.
No.
Bottom of the table.
They were higher than they are now.
Yeah.
Plymouth is
But
still,
it was still.
we should speak more about Plymouth because it is just.
It was still a Pep Guardiola City.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, 20.
Which brings us on to Plymouth 1,
Yeah.
Liverpool 0. And that certainly deserves to stand amongst those other three giant
Yes,
kills.
it's a minor statistic compared to beating the team that's top of the Premier League, the team that topped the new 2016 Champions League table. And arguably, I mean, if you're saying the best team in Europe on current form, of course it wasn't the team, as the point we've made earlier, it wasn't the team packed with the regulars, but that is not Plymouth's fault. And given their background, that they've had all this a turmoil of a season, and that they found the right day. It was, do you know what? From 15 minutes out, you watch a lot of football, although nobody in the ground would have thought this. Just sitting back, a pace back, watching on the television, I thought, it's your day. You're going to win. You are going to win. And there was this great save from the goalkeeper from Diogo Jota, wasn't it? And although I think Lee Dixon, who was commentating, put it into perspective. He kept cool, Lee, because it was one of those where you could have gone right over the top because of the consequence, saying that it's a save he would expect to make. But in the context of that
and then he had the
finale,
tip over afterwards.
He did, yeah.
Just one final thought. Do you think
somebody asked me, of my family who don't know anything about football, is Conor Hazard related to Eden Hazard? which I think not.
No, nor to Mickey Hazard.
No.
Do you think the former Manchester United and Everton and former Plymouth manager Wayne Rooney rather enjoyed
former
Liverpool?
Birmingham manager? I've mentioned, of course, in my game that he'd been managed at Birmingham as well.
But do you think he enjoyed watching Liverpool knocked out? Yeah.
I think he would have enjoyed that because for Wayne's a proper football person, and some of those players would have given everything to him in the time that he was there, and he would have loved it for them. I'm absolutely 100% sure of that.
That's this week's comparisons. All that's left is stoppage time.
Stoppage time.
And for stoppage time, we've come closer together because we're looking at Zoom to introduce Jack Whiting of Interlegends FC, who conducts charity matches. And if you got the M6 to a northern game from down here in London, when you pass the RAC building, you pass Walsall's ground, don't you? I always look at Walsall's ground, and you've got a game there, Jack.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, so we're just about to officially announce that in partnership with Walsall this week. The team has come together, and I can't believe I'm saying it, but we had a game last night. We had Fraser Campbell come and play for us, and Leroy Lita. The boys ran out 10-0 winners against Autistic FC Dads. So they're a team of dads who basically they started a football team for their sons to play in because there was a barrier for them to get into sort of standard grassroots clubs, and they started this team that focus on bringing autistic kids together. So we played for some amazing causes. We were fortunate, like you said, to play at Walsall and other grounds. Last year we played at Sixfields as well. So it's great for us to be able to have the opportunity and to help give back. And like I said, Fraser Campbell, Leroy Lita, Aaron McLean, Will Hoskins, Pascal Chimbonda, Paul Konchesky, Ricky Lambert have all played for us.
So what are these games you've got coming up?
Our next game is at Tamworth. So we've got like a Masters style tournament there. It's more 2025, so it's on AstroTurf, it's on 4G pitch. We've got Troy Deeney in that one doing a Watford team. We've got Mark Albright doing a Leicester team. Sam Saunders doing Brentford. There's 10 different teams going in there. It's going to be a great occasion. And then we've also got another match in 2 weeks' time for the Anthony James Foundation, which basically buy toys for sick kids in hospitals for like Christmas and birthdays and stuff. So there's some great causes that we play for and we get involved in. We're very fortunate to be able to do it.
Where did it start for you, Jack?
It started out, I run a festival accessory business called Be a Lanyard, and I used to donate a percentage of our profits to charity and do the whole planting a tree for every pound we made. And I grew quite frustrated with what we were doing because I never really saw the smile or the benefit that we for the causes we were given. The trees you can't go and see. It's sort of like, you can't go and take a picture of them. So I sat back with my brother and my dad, who I own the business with, and said, we've got to do something completely different to give back and see, the smile we can put on people's faces. And one of our business advisors is actually the chairman of Northampton Town Football Club and good friend of ours. And he just said, look, why don't you do something at our stadium? We threw around the idea of doing a gig or a concert or festival, and realised we don't know anything about that. But I used to run a football team in Northampton many, many years ago, and I quite enjoyed running it. And I said, look, what if we did a charity football match? And we were lucky enough to have the likes of like Ralph Little come down, and we played against Spurs legends, so we had lots of Spurs legends turn up and play. And we sold 3,800 tickets and that was our allocation we got from the club. So it was really, really good. And the one thing that I was quite surprised at when we did that was afterwards I did a bit of like market research with the customers that came, and they all said, look, we would probably come to this every year, and we'd actually come to a match if you did it more regularly and follow you around like a proper team. And the boys that played for us were all like, look, we missed the camaraderie of the 3 p.m. kickoff, and we liked how low touch this was. We didn't have to, commit every single week. So we'd love to get involved a little bit more regularly. So that made the team.
Give us dates. Tamworth?
23rd of March.
Walsall?
Walsall is the 10th of May.
And now admit it. Who do you support?
I'm a Tottenham fan.
Oh, you've just ruined everything.
Only for you. I'm very democratic about this. You could say anything, unless perhaps a Torquay fan. That might have been, as a Woking fan, that's a big rivalry for us, or Aldershot, of course. And before you go, Jack, tell us about Charlton, because we're working towards maybe him coming down to see you. That's later in the year, I guess.
Yes, it is. So the Charlton match is on the 7th of June. Every time I speak to them, they always mention your name, Martin. They say that there's a match that you wish you commentated on, the match that no one has a record of.
It's called Greatest Game Never Seen. I'm trying to make a program of it. We're starting with the guys who make the podcast to try and get a program to give it a legacy. It deserves that. Yeah, that's a Charlton game. So the Valley's quite special for me at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. They reached out off the back of what we did at Northampton, and they just said that we've got to do something with you guys because we love the whole ethos. It brings club and community closer together. And we managed to get a deal over the line to get that done. And we're very different with other sort of like events that happen where they might rent the pitch for a day, whereas we work in partnership with the clubs to help them unite fans, bring them in. I'm a strong believer in football being the working men class, and my opinion of football is that this day and age is going towards more of the business side of things. And our ticket prices are very, very accessible. People can come, they can meet the legends, they can have a pint with them afterwards and take photos and get them signed stuff. And our tickets last night were only £5 for adults and £2.50 for kids, so it's very accessible for everyone.
Jack Whiting, I don't mind that you're a Tottenham supporter. After all that, I nearly said Arsenal. Tottenham supporter. Thank you very much.
More power to you, and I hope we see you on the circuit.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Into the FC. That's it from the podcast from Martin and me.
See you next time.
Ta-ra. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. It was a long one, but sometimes the long ones are the best. Don't forget, there's the Patreon if you want to get more involved. There's substack.com where you can read Martin's letters and my musings on the world. And you can subscribe and leave messages and generally get involved, like us. It's the Joy of Football podcast, and it's back in a week's time.